Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
The first letter arrived like a slap across the face, a credit card application denied. I stared at it, bewildered, because I hadn't applied for anything. My wallet was still in my purse, my bank accounts untouched. I tossed it aside, thinking it was some kind of mistake, maybe a phishing scam. But then came another and another, each one a fresh stab. Denied, denied, denied. It wasn't just credit cards either. Within a couple of weeks my online banking portal wouldn't let me log in. My debit card was suddenly declined at the grocery store, leaving me standing there, red-faced, with a cart full of food I couldn't pay for. The cashier just gave me a blank stare, and I mumbled something about a system error, feeling my stomach clench with a fear I couldn't name. Then the calls started. At first they were polite, automated messages about unusual activity on accounts I didn't recognize. Soon they escalated. Live voices, sharp and demanding, calling at all hours even past midnight. Debt collectors, they said, for thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. Accounts with names like Arbor Platinum, Community Secure Line, Homeowner Advantage. I kept telling them it wasn't me, that I was a victim of identity theft, but they just recited account numbers and due dates, their voices flat and unsympathetic. My credit score, once something I'd meticulously guarded, plummeted faster than a stone in a well. It felt like my entire financial life was being systematically dismantled, brick by brick, and I was powerless to stop it. Karen, her blonde hair carefully styled and her smile tight and unreadable, watched with a look that gave nothing away. She had this way of looking at you, like she was evaluating your worth, deciding if you were up to her standards. Everyone knew she ran the HOA like her own personal kingdom. She'd initiated what she called mandatory security audits for all homeowners, insisting we needed to update our files for community safety and insurance compliance. We all dutifully handed over copies of our driver's licenses, birth certificates, and yes, our social security numbers. She said it was for new digital homeowner profiles. We believed her. Who wouldn't? She was the president, after all. But while we were busy trusting her, she was busy copying, scanning, and cataloging. Every single piece of our personal information neatly filed away in her HOA office, which was really just a glorified spare bedroom in her sprawling house on Elmwood Drive. She didn't just open one or two credit cards. She opened dozens, not just in my name, but in the names of half the homeowners in Arbor Ridge Heights. It was a systematic, calculated invasion. I found a receipt tucked into a pile of junk mail that somehow slipped past the debt collectors for a champagne brunch in Venice. The date was last spring. The name on the receipt, Lisa Maxwell, my name. While I was struggling to put gas in my old Civic and wondering how I'd afford groceries, Karen was sipping bubbly in Italy, charging it all to me. The thought made my blood run cold. I confronted her, of course. I marched into the HOA office, the Venice receipt clutched in my trembling hand. "Karen," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "What is this? My credit is ruined, my bank account is locked, and I have debt collectors calling me for charges I didn't make. And this," I shoved the receipt at her. She barely glanced at it. Her eyes, usually so sharp, just went flat. "Lisa, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false concern, "I think you're under a lot of stress. Perhaps you're mistaken. We've had a few homeowners experiencing delusions lately. The stress of homeownership, you know." Then came the board meeting. I brought my evidence, the denied applications, the debt collector letters, the Venice receipt. Spencer Reed, the vice president, a man whose face was perpetually flushed, scoffed. "Lisa, this is highly inappropriate. You're accusing our esteemed president of—" "What exactly? Fraud? This sounds like defamation." Celeste Mason, the secretary, a woman who always wore too much perfume, nodded vigorously. "Indeed, we've already discussed this. You're causing a disturbance. Perhaps a fine is in order for spreading malicious rumors. They threatened me with liens on my house, more fines, and even a lawsuit for defamation. They said I was delusional, a troublemaker. Some whispered that Karen had dirt on every board member. Old financial missteps, zoning violations, even a few marital indiscretions. Others simply feared her, her iron grip on the community, her ability to make life miserable for anyone who crossed her. My life was scorched. I couldn't get a car loan to replace my dying Civic. A background check for a potential job at the local library failed because of my poor financial history. The sheriff wouldn't even take a report, saying it was a civil matter and I needed to hire a lawyer. A lawyer? I could barely afford ramen noodles. Every door slammed shut in my face. The injustice burned, a hot, searing flame in my chest. I was trapped, suffocating under a mountain of debt that wasn't mine, abandoned by the very systems meant to protect me. but the fire inside me wasn't just anger anymore. It was hardening, transforming into something cold and sharp. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make them pay, and my plan was going to be darker than anything Karen Preston could ever imagine. My tiny apartment, once a place of peace, became a war room, littered with printouts and highlighted passages. My first real move was to find others. I couldn't be the only one. I started subtly, talking to neighbors, asking casual questions about their finances, their credit, if they'd had any unusual mail lately. Most people just shrugged or looked at me with pity, as if I truly was delusional. But then there was Declan Hart, who lived 2 doors down. Declan, a quiet man who kept to himself, had always seemed a bit withdrawn. One afternoon, I saw him struggling to jump-start his old pickup truck. I offered to help, and while we were fiddling with the battery cables, I casually mentioned my credit woes. He stopped, his wrench clattering to the driveway. "You too?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. He told me about a sudden, inexplicable mortgage payment increase, and a car loan he'd been denied despite having a perfect payment history for years. "They said my debt-to-income ratio was through the roof," he said, shaking his head. "But I haven't taken out a new loan in a decade." That was it. The crack in Karen's facade. Declan and I started comparing notes. He had also gone through the security audit with Karen, handing over his personal documents. We found others, too. Phoebe Jennings, a sweet older lady who suddenly couldn't pay her property taxes because her savings account had been mysteriously drained. Simon Blake, whose small business loan was rejected, forcing him to lay off his only employee. The pattern was undeniable, sickeningly clear. Karen wasn't just attacking me. She was systematically bleeding Arbor Ridge Heights dry. We started a quiet secret group, meeting in Declan's garage after dark, whispering our stories, piecing together the puzzle. It was terrifying, but also empowering. We weren't alone. As our little resistance grew, Karen seemed to sense it. Or maybe it was just her usual paranoia. One week, a new HOA bulletin appeared in everyone's mailbox, printed on thick, glossy paper, signed by Karen herself. It announced a mandatory community beautification fund, a new, non-negotiable monthly fee of $500 per household effective immediately, for the upkeep of our shared green spaces and the enhancement of property values, the bulletin declared. It was outrageous. Our existing HOA fees barely covered the common areas, and now this, it was a blatant money grab, an attempt to squeeze even more from us, likely to cover her growing expenses. I decided to confront Spencer Reed, the vice president, hoping to appeal to some shred of decency he might possess. I caught him leaving his house one morning, briefcase in hand. "Spencer," I called out, "about this new fee, it's excessive, and there's no transparency about where the money is going." He stopped, his face tightening. "Lisa," he said, his voice clipped, "the board has voted. It's a unanimous decision. You're just stirring up trouble again." I pressed him. "Spencer, people are losing their homes because of this. Declan, Phoebe, Simon, their finances are ruined. We know Karen is behind this. She's committing fraud." He looked around nervously, then leaned in close, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You don't know what you're talking about, Lisa. You have no idea what she's capable of. Just drop it, for your own good." He hurried away, leaving me standing there, the chilling implication of his words hanging in the morning air. What exactly was Karen capable of? Declan, typically unreadable, looked utterly defeated. Our secret group, now a desperate huddle, met again that night. The air in Declan's garage was thick with fear and a simmering rage. "We have to expose her," I insisted, holding up the property record showing the land transfer to Arbor Holdings Group. "This proves she's stealing our land, not just our money. This is concrete evidence." Declan nodded slowly. "But how?" "We tried the sheriff. We tried the board. They're all in her pocket or too scared to move. We go public," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. "We get this in front of every homeowner. We call an emergency meeting and we lay out everything." Simon was hesitant. "Lisa, that's risky. Karen will shut us down. She'll spin it, accuse us of slander." Phoebe added, "She'll make our lives even more miserable." But the thought of Declan losing his home, of us all being picked off one by one, spurred us on. We drafted flyers, detailing Karen's schemes, the fake credit cards, the exorbitant new fees, and the shocking land transfers. We worked through the night, printing them on Declan's old clunky printer, the whirring sound a defiant hum in the darkness. The next morning, under the cover of pre-dawn gloom, we fanned out across Arbor Ridge Heights, slipping the flyers under every front door. My heart pounded with every step, a mix of terror and exhilaration. This was it, the direct challenge. By noon, the community was buzzing. Phones were ringing, neighbors were gathering in driveways, their faces a mixture of confusion, anger, and dawning comprehension. The HOA message board, usually filled with mundane announcements, exploded with furious posts. Karen's response was swift and brutal. By early afternoon, a new, official-looking notice was taped over every one of our flyers. It was a cease and desist order issued by the HOA's legal counsel, threatening immediate lawsuits for defamation, harassment, and inciting unrest against anyone distributing unauthorized and libelous materials. A few hours later, a black SUV with tinted windows, not usually seen in our quiet neighborhood, began slowly cruising the streets. It stopped at houses where groups were gathered. Its occupants, two burly men in dark suits, simply watching. The message was clear. Karen was watching, and she had muscle. That evening, a text message from an unknown number popped up on my phone. "Lisa, you are playing a dangerous game. Stop now, your family will pay the price." It was chilling. My parents lived hundreds of miles away, completely uninvolved. How did Karen even know about them? The threat felt deeply personal, a cold hand squeezing my chest. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for that Friday. We decided, despite the threats, that we had to go. This was our last chance to confront them publicly. As we walked into the community center, the air was thick with tension. Karen sat at the head of the long table, flanked by Spencer Reed and Celeste Mason, all three of them radiating an icy calm. The room was packed, homeowners spilling into the aisles, their faces a mixture of fear and defiance. I stepped forward, holding up a copy of the land transfer document. "Karen," I began, my voice shaking slightly but holding firm, "we know about Arbor Holdings Group. We know you're transferring community land to your private company. This is theft." Karen smiled, a slow, predatory smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lisa," she purred, "you really are quite persistent, aren't you? And so, misinformed." She turned to the crowd. "My dear neighbors, I understand there's been some confusion, some unfortunate rumors spread by a disgruntled few." She paused, letting her gaze sweep over me, Declan, Phoebe, and Simon. "The truth is, Arbor Holdings Group is a new visionary initiative, a partnership with a major developer to build a state-of-the-art community center and recreational facilities right here in Arbor Ridge Heights. It will increase all our property values exponentially." A murmur went through the crowd. Some looked skeptical, but others, swayed by the promise of rising property values, seemed to waver. "And," Karen continued, her voice rising, "the initial investment, the transfer of those unused, neglected lots, was a necessary first step. A brilliant strategic move, if I do say so myself." She pulled out a glossy brochure, filled with artist renderings of sparkling pools and manicured tennis courts. "This is our future, Arbor Ridge Heights. Don't let a few malcontents derail our progress." Then Spencer Reed stood up. "Furthermore," he announced, his voice booming, "due to the recent baseless accusations and the disruption caused, the board has unanimously voted to implement a new immediate community harmony surcharge of $1,000 per household. This will cover the legal fees incurred defending our esteemed president and the HOA from these malicious attacks." A collective gasp went through the room. $1,000 on top of everything else. Karen leaned back, a triumphant glint in her eye. "Any further questions?" she asked, her gaze fixed on me. Just as I opened my mouth to speak, the lights in the community center flickered once, twice, and then plunged the room into complete darkness. A sudden piercing scream echoed from the back of the room, followed by the sound of shattering glass. The sudden darkness was absolute, a heavy blanket that smothered the room. The scream, sharp and terrified, hung in the air, followed by the unmistakable crash of glass. Panic erupted, shouts, gasps, the scraping of chairs. My heart hammered against my ribs. "What was that?" Phoebe whispered, clutching my arm. Declan, ever practical, fumbled for his phone, its flashlight beam cutting a weak path through the chaos. The beam landed on the back wall, near the emergency exit. A large window was shattered, shards glittering on the floor, and lying amidst the glass, a figure. It was Celeste Mason, the HOA secretary, her face ashen, clutching her arm. A rock wrapped in a flyer, one of ours, lay beside her. Before anyone could fully react, a voice amplified by a bullhorn boomed from outside the broken window. "Arbor Ridge Heights, you've been lied to. You've been robbed. Karen Preston is a fraud." It was Simon Blake, his voice raw with fury. He stood outside, silhouetted against the faint streetlights, holding the bullhorn. Beside him, a small crowd of homeowners, faces grim and determined, had gathered. They held up signs hastily scrawled, "Stop the fraud. Where's our money, Karen? Arbor Holdings is a lie." The room inside erupted. Some homeowners rushed towards the broken window, peering out, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. Others turned on Karen, their whispers growing louder, more accusatory. "What is this, Karen?" someone shouted. Spencer Reed, looking utterly bewildered, stammered, "This is an outrage, this is an attack." Karen, however, remained eerily calm. She slowly rose from her chair, her eyes scanning the room, then fixing on Simon outside. "This," she declared, her voice cutting through the din, "is exactly what happens when you let disgruntled elements spread misinformation. This is a coordinated act of vandalism and harassment, designed to undermine the very fabric of our community." She pointed a finger at me. "And Lisa Maxwell is at the heart of it." Karen's composure finally cracked. Her face drained of color, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "This is a witch hunt," she shrieked, her voice losing its polished edge. "You have no right." "I have powerful friends," Detective Sharma simply raised an eyebrow. "Your powerful friends won't be able to help you with federal wire fraud charges, Ms. Preston. We have a warrant for your arrest, and for the seizure of all HOA financial records, including those related to Arbor Holdings Group." She nodded to two officers, who immediately moved towards Karen. Spencer Reed, seeing the writing on the wall, suddenly found his voice. "Wait, Detective, I had no idea. She manipulated us. She threatened me. My family." He looked desperately at the homeowners, trying to distance himself. "She said she had evidence of irregularities in my past business dealings." Celeste Mason, still clutching her arm, wailed. "She forced me to sign documents. She said she'd expose my gambling debts." The board members, once so loyal, crumbled under the pressure, each trying to save their own skin, throwing Karen under the bus with frantic accusations. The room erupted again, but this time it was a roar of outrage directed squarely at Karen and the now exposed board members. Homeowners surged forward, shouting questions, demanding answers. The glossy brochure for the state-of-the-art community center was snatched from Karen's hand and torn to shreds as the officers led a disheveled, sputtering Karen Preston out of the community center in handcuffs. A wave of relief mixed with a deep, unsettling anger washed over me. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The HOA was in ruins, its leaders exposed and disgraced. But the financial wreckage Karen left behind, the shredded credit scores, the lost savings, the threatened homes, that was a mountain we still had to climb. And as I looked at the faces of my neighbors, some still angry, some simply bewildered, I knew it would be a long, hard road to rebuild trust and repair the damage she had wrought. There would be no easy fixes, no magical recovery, just the long, arduous process of picking up the pieces. Homeowners surged forward, a tide of accusations and demands, their voices rising in a storm of betrayal. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews, legal consultations, and frantic attempts to salvage what was left of our financial lives. Detective Sharma and her team worked tirelessly, their investigation uncovering layers of deceit far deeper than we had imagined. The Arbor Holdings Group wasn't just a shell for land theft. It was a conduit for laundering money from the fraudulent credit cards, funneling funds into offshore accounts. The board members, Spencer Reed and Celeste Mason, quickly turned on Karen, their desperate testimonies painting her as a master manipulator who held their past indiscretions over their heads. They claimed they were victims too, coerced into complicity. It was a flimsy defense, but it was their only one. The court proceedings began months later, dragging on for weeks. The courtroom was packed every single day, a grim tableau of Arbor Ridge Heights residents, all seeking justice, all bearing the invisible wounds of financial ruin. Karen, surprisingly, walked in on the first day with a defiant smirk, dressed in an expensive tailored suit, her hair still perfectly coiffed. She looked like she was attending a charity gala, not facing a lifetime in prison. Her lawyer, a slick, expensive-looking man named Mr. Thorne, tried every trick in the book to derail the prosecution. He painted Karen as a benevolent community leader, a visionary misunderstood by a few troublemakers with axes to grind. He tried to discredit me, Declan, Phoebe, and Simon, suggesting we were disgruntled residents with personal vendettas, perhaps even orchestrating a smear campaign. When I took the stand, the weight of the past year pressed down on me, but I refused to break. My voice, though still carrying the raw edge of my ruined credit, was firm. I recounted every denied application, every midnight call from debt collectors, the humiliation at the grocery store, the phantom champagne brunch in Venice. "She stole my life," I told the jury, my gaze unwavering as I looked directly at Karen, who finally averted her eyes. "She didn't just take my money, she took my sense of security, my future, everything I had worked for." Declan, Phoebe, and Simon followed, each sharing their own harrowing stories of financial devastation. Declan spoke of the eviction notice, the panic of almost losing his home. Phoebe, her voice trembling, described how her life savings meant for her retirement had vanished. Simon detailed the collapse of his small business, the faces of his laid-off employees haunting him. The prosecution, led by a sharp, methodical assistant district attorney, laid out the evidence with devastating precision. The forged documents, the meticulously tracked bank statements showing money flowing from our accounts into Karen's offshore shell companies, the land transfers, the fraudulent credit card applications. It was overwhelming. Karen's defiant smirk slowly faded over the course of the trial, replaced by a tight, white-knuckled grip on the defense table, her eyes darting nervously between the jury and her increasingly frustrated lawyer. Mr. Thorne's attempts to poke holes in the prosecution's case were met with a mountain of irrefutable data. The jury returned their verdict swiftly, guilty on all counts for Karen Preston. Federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and grand larceny. A collective gasp, then a quiet, almost reverent cheer, rippled through the courtroom. Karen's face contorted, her eyes blazing with a raw, unadulterated fury that finally broke through her polished facade. She lunged forward, restrained only by the bailiffs, screaming obscenities. She was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, her reign of terror over, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Spencer Reed and Celeste Mason, despite their desperate pleas of coercion and claims of being manipulated, received lesser but still significant sentences for their complicity. Their reputations shattered beyond repair, their powerful friends had indeed been useless. The community center, once a symbol of Karen's oppressive control, became a hub for recovery, but it was a slow, painful process. The old HOA was officially dissolved, its fraudulent bylaws nullified, its very name now a bitter taste in our mouths. But the aftermath was messy, complicated, and far from a clean slate. We formed a temporary committee, a group of exhausted but determined homeowners, to navigate the legal and financial quagmire. We discovered that recovering the stolen funds was a painstaking, often impossible process. Many of the credit card debts were eventually discharged due to the fraud, but the impact on our credit scores lingered for years, a dark cloud over every financial decision. Some homes, like Declan's, were saved from foreclosure, but the fear of losing everything remained etched in people's minds, a constant low-level hum of anxiety. Arbor Ridge Heights was no longer the idyllic, manicured community it once pretended to be. The trust was broken, the illusion shattered. Neighbors who had once been friendly now eyed each other with suspicion, wondering who knew what, who was truly a victim, and who might have turned a blind eye. We held endless meetings trying to establish a new transparent HOA, one built on trust and accountability, but the enthusiasm was muted, replaced by a weary cynicism. The scars ran deep, not just on our finances, but on the very fabric of our community. I, too, was changed. My finances were slowly, painstakingly rebuilding, but the experience had left a permanent mark. The world felt colder, more dangerous, and the naive trust I once held was gone, replaced by a sharp, wary skepticism. The fight had been won, the queen dethroned, but the kingdom was still in disarray, and the long, arduous process of picking up the pieces had only just begun. There was no grand celebration, no triumphant parade, just the quiet, grinding reality of a community trying to heal from a wound that might never fully close.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.